geek. I was born that way, raised that way. Like, I have no apologies for it. I realized when I was in high school I didn't really fit anywhere because I varsity lettered in 5 sports, but I'd also read Lord of the Rings by the time I was like 5th grade. So like I was just kind of an amoeba. I didn't really fit anywhere. But I have no problems and no qualms talking about my nerddom and my geekdom. And so I want to begin this brand new series that is, I think, one of the most important things I get to talk about throughout the theme of this series leading up to Easter by showing you a map of my favorite world that was created, that is a fictional world. It's called, anybody know what this is? Okay, you're too scared to say it for fear of everyone else judging you, but this is Middle Earth. This is a map that is from the Lord of the Rings. And don't judge me, okay? Tolkien wrote this book in World War I based on his Christian lens, okay? So he was looking about this battle between good and evil. Christian overtones through the whole thing, all right? But what's really interesting to me, I hope I'm not spoiling this, but if I am, again, it was written in World War I, so you kind of got to get over yourself, all right? The whole point of this is that the main character of the story lives in this part of the world. He lives in the Shire, and he is given a task to destroy this ring, this thing that is really the center of evil in their world, all right? And to do so, he has to take it to a tower, to a volcano, basically, here, all right? So, start of the journey, end of the journey. Now, why am I showing you a map of weird things that don't exist to begin a new series? Well, here's why. Scholars and nerds and geeks and average people who just watch the movies have debated and debated for years now. Why did they choose the route that they chose to go? So just for context sake, okay, they decided to kind of go this southeastern route and loop around between this section of mountains to here, but they could have gone straight across the Misty Mountains. They could have gone up and around. They could have gone down the coast. Millions of different ways, right? Why did they go this way? Why, what was the right way? What was the wrong way? Well, I'm glad you're asking that question and not just me, because really, honestly, this is a metaphor for stuff that happens in your life every single day and you don't really think about it. See, we all have stuff. We all have tasks. And maybe you don't think in maps like I do. Maybe you don't think in pictures like I do. But whenever there's a problem in your life, you know where you're at because you got to figure that out, and you kind of know where you want to be. It's the between that's the problem, right? It's the between that's the problem. And here's the real rub. See, we do this thing, and I think it's an American thing. I'm not convinced it doesn't happen elsewhere, but I know it happens in America. We get convinced that there's a right way. There's one way, and there's one way only, and that one way is the right way, right? And so we're determined that there's some sort of path we're supposed to take, some sort of direction we're supposed to go, and we have to figure that out on our own. We're going to work out all the steps from here to there. We're going to make sure it looks exactly like everybody else's path that deals with this problem. And so here's the question, here's the thing that I want to sit on you as we begin this new series. I just want you to think about this for a second with an open mind. What if there's a better way than right? Now, hold that thought for a second, okay? This new series is called I Will Follow. And the whole premise of this series is that the beginning, the first Christians, the first people to call upon the name of the Lord in the first century church, they called themselves followers of the way. In fact, they didn't call themselves Christians. The word Christian only appears 3 times in the Bible, and all 3 times it was mostly derogatory. It was more of a political term. So the people on the outside of the church would say, oh, that's kind of their political party, their little Jesuses or their little Christians or little Christs. And it was like, okay, well, we have Caesar and they have Jesus. That's what the word Christian came from. The Christians didn't call themselves that. Now, again, we've adopted that, and it's totally fine. It's become part of our vernacular. But this is important. They called themselves followers of the way. And they got this, honestly, from Paul, one of the most popular, most famous Jesus followers, when he said in Acts, like he was actually in trouble, he was on trial, and they were trying to figure out, he was trying to defend himself. And he goes, all these things you're accusing me of, I didn't do, but, however, he says, I will admit that I worship the God of our ancestors as a follower of the way. And I like that. It doesn't say, I worship the God of our ancestors as a Christian. I worship the God of our ancestors as a follower of the way. Now, it's become almost cliche. It's become almost cliche, even in our culture today, to say I'm a Jesus follower, right? I say it. I stopped saying the word Christian a long time ago, and the reason was not because I don't call myself a Christian. I am. I follow Jesus. But at the heart of who I am, I want to know that I am following the way, that like the way I've oriented my life, the way I've put myself together is I am moving in the direction that Jesus would have me go. And that's what this really meant. This is what Paul meant when he said that. I have decided to worship the God of our ancestors by following the way. And let's just be really honest, Paul didn't start this. We know where this came from if you've been around Sunday school or church long enough. Jesus actually said something that put this whole pathway in front of everyone who would call upon his name later. In John chapter 4, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, fourth gospel in the New Testament, eyewitness of all the things that Jesus did. John records that Jesus says this, I am the way and the truth and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me. Now, what we've kind of done with this phrase, the church history, is we've made this really about like heaven and hell. And I'm not saying it's not in the context of this, okay? But what we've done in the church is the translation interpretation of this is that Jesus is saying, and I'm not saying he's not saying this, I just think there's something more to it. That basically he's saying, if you want to go to heaven, I'm the way. If you want to see the Father, it's me. And I think he is saying that, but I think he's saying something more than that. See, I think what Jesus is actually saying is this life, this is huge. This life, this God-seeing life, both now and eternally, this life that you really want, I'm the way to get there. Now, we love talking about this a lot in church culture, the truth, okay? And I'm all about truth, okay? I'm an intellectual. If you didn't get it from the nerd thing I did with the map like 3 minutes ago, I'm an intellectual at heart. I love thinking about fact and truth and all of those things. But Eugene Peterson said something that I think really summarizes the way the church thinks about this verse. Check out what he has to say. Jesus as the truth gets far more attention than Jesus as the way. Jesus as the way is the most frequently evaded metaphor among the Christians with whom I have worked. And by the way, he was a pastor for 50 years. He was the guy who put together the Message translation, did a lot of different things, planted an amazing church, wrote a great book that was really a love letter to pastors. But he understood through his years and years of working in the church that we Christians just have this tendency to give Jesus as the truth a lot more airtime than Jesus as the way. And look, why does that matter? Ask that for a minute. Just wrestle that around in your brain for a second. Why does it matter that we might spend more time talking about Jesus as the way? Not diminishing Jesus as the truth, not diminishing Jesus as the life, both of those important, but Jesus as the way. I think it's because if you take the verse that I gave you from Paul in Acts and you take what Jesus said as well, and then you put it together with what Eugene Peterson's saying here, we get this understanding that the early Christians, the first century Christians, the newest Jesus followers, they understood that their allegiance to Jesus had led them to a whole way of life. Not just like a t-shirt that they wore, not just like a political party, not just like a thing they did on Sundays and then went home. Like not just something like where they called out his name every once in a while, or like he was some sort of eternal genie that they said, okay, I'm going to do this thing, and as soon as I do this thing, God's going to give me what I want because of Jesus. Like what they saw, what the early church had, the power that they had, the relationship that they had, the understanding that they had was all centered on this idea that Jesus had given them a whole way of life. I'm going to say something hard, okay? And I know what I'm about to say is going to step on some toes, okay? So deep breath. It's really only going to step on your toes if you've been a Jesus follower a long time. So all of you that are not Jesus followers, you're probably going to go, yeah! But all the rest of us, deep breath. Did you know you can be a Christian and not follow the way of Jesus? Like, you can be convicted but not committed. Do you ever think of that? Like, that's hard, okay? And I know this is as deep as I'm going to go, okay? I just want to sit in this for a second. That we can do all the things. We can sit in the right chair. We can stand and sing when we're supposed to and sit back down. That we can cry out to God when we're in times of trouble, right? And we can know the scriptures, and we can read the things and do the things and sing the things. And we can be convicted and convinced, but not committed. See, this is such a foreign concept to the first century church. Like if we could go back in time and take a time machine and go back to a year after the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus, okay? We could go back within that first 12, 18 months of the church. This would be such a foreign concept. And the reason is if you were going to follow Jesus, it had, in that region, your life was in danger. right? Because the Jewish government didn't like you and the Roman government didn't like you, and so you had put yourself in the middle of this fight that you didn't even care about because you just want to be a follower of Jesus. But like you couldn't be convinced and not be committed because it was an all-in thing. And throughout the years, baptism has become kind of that symbol that we try to use to talk about the commitment for us. And so, when you're baptized, if you've been baptized before, the pastor said something along the lines of like, die to who you were and rise to who you're going to become in Jesus. Like it's a new life. You've been born again. That's what the water symbolizes. But like this was flesh and blood real to the first century church. It's just that sometimes, if we're being honest, okay? If we're being honest, sometimes it's easier to be convinced than it is to be committed. It's easier to go, okay, you know what, I know, Jesus said that. How many times have you done this? I know that if I made that change, I made that choice, if I did something different, I know that's right. But like then making the choice and stepping across that line, right? That's the hard part. And so what I want to do for these next 7 weeks leading up to Easter is I want to ask some hard questions and give you some answers. We're going to wrestle with some things. And it's all going to come down to 7 statements, 7 things that happen in our lives. They go to the end of the statement like this: I will follow you when. I would like all of us to just say this out loud for a second, okay? Just crowd participation with me early in the sermon, I know. But here we go, all right? I will follow you when. Now, the blank on the end of that is going to be the next several messages. We're going to fill in those things. And today, the one that I want to lay on you and just think about for the next few moments we have together, I will follow you when life feels heavy. I will follow you when life happens, right? I will follow you when life happens. Because I think, of all the other things we're going to talk about, this is really the rubber meets the road moment for most of us. I mean, the truth is, life is heavy a lot. And I don't just mean big decisions, okay? I don't just mean some calamity has come upon you. That stuff happens. But I mean daily things where you got to make a tough choice. And you know this choice is going to have implications for later. Or you get a difficult temptation that's been laid on you. You got a difficult thing you're wrestling with. You got a hard something has happened. A circumstance has come upon you just don't know how to wrestle with. And what I want us to be able to do, like as Jesus followers, this is what I want for you. And if you're not a Jesus follower yet, I'm not forcing this upon you. I'm not trying to manipulate you. I'm just offering you what's on the other side of a relationship with Jesus. That we as Jesus followers, when we hit those moments, we could say, okay, life is heavy, but I have chosen to follow you. Now, one more thing on this before I start breaking this down. See, the tendency for us and the reason that maybe we don't have the same kind of conviction that the first century church did, the reason that this becomes hard for us is because somewhere along the way, we got it in our heads that when we started following Jesus, nothing difficult would happen again. And I get that honest. I grew up with that too. I remember early, like the first time I started struggling in my faith was a moment where I was facing like death in our family. There was someone that I loved that was dying, and I thought, okay, wait, God, I love you, and you say you love me, so why is this thing happening, right? And I had this weird perception, okay, but I got it honest. And if you're sitting here with that today, you probably got it honest. If I'd experienced what you'd experienced, I'd probably believe the same thing. But Jesus didn't promise that. Honestly, he promised something so much better. But the first step, before we can go any further, is you just got to own the fact that just because you're a Jesus follower doesn't mean that everything in your life is going to be rainbows, butterflies, and unicorns. That sooner or later something's going to happen. It's what happens. It's how we look at that moment, how we experience that moment. It's what happens on the other side of that moment. That's what Jesus has promised, to wrestle in that with you. So, I will follow when life feels heavy. This is what I want. This is like the anthem that I would love for all of us to be able to live into as we walk out of this place today. Now, when life feels heavy, there are 3 different reactions, okay? There are 3 different pathways. And all of us do this, and I'm not guilting anyone, okay? Because as I go through this, there's been moments where I have chosen one of these other ways as well. And it's an honest human condition thing. And every situation is different, and every circumstance is different. What we're trying to vie for is that deep-rooted faith that when those things happen to us, our first gut reaction might be to do one of these other things, but we have decided to follow Jesus. So when life feels heavy, there's three ways, okay? The first one is the way of the world. The second one is the way of religion. And the third one is the way of Jesus. Now, let me break these down for you for a minute. So let's talk about the way of the world for a second. The way of the world says when life feels heavy, the way of the world is escape. All right. Escape looks both physical and mental, but either one of these things happen, and they probably happen to you. Like, have you ever heard somebody say, or maybe you've said this is horrible, let's go on a vacation? Right? Like, the beach is calling me, but it's not the beach calling you, it's the thing that happened that's pushing you that way. Like, I've done that, okay? There's a place that I love to go called Jekyll Island, Georgia. It's my happy place. There's 2 reasons it's my happy place. 1, it's a beach. 2, there's never anyone there. You can't steal my vacation spot, okay? It's mine. Like, but I have these moments where I'm so overwhelmed by something, and I just feel like, well, I just need to go. Like, if I could just get to the beach, if we just get, it's like 9 hours, we've timed it, we can get there in an afternoon. It's not exactly a weekend trip, but you take a vacation day, I take a vacation day, we can just go. And we have this, like, physical escape, right? And I don't know what the heavy is for you, all right? Fill in the blank. But this has become a tendency for us as people. It's not necessarily Jesus follower thing, it's just a thing. That when something difficult happens, or our marriage blows up, our job blows up, our kids' lives blow up, something happens with our college entrance, something happens with an exam, something happens we just didn't want it to have happen that way, we just go, okay, I just need to go. If I was somewhere else. Now, I know I just said vacations, but let me just take one step deeper in this with you for a second. This is the kind of thing that happens, especially for us in marriage. If I just, this isn't working in this relationship, so let me step into this relationship. That's what escape looks like in that too. It's this, if I was just in a different spot, if I was just in a different relationship, if something was different, if I could change my environment, life would be better. That's escape. But there's also the mental escape. Okay, so mental escape, I don't know what this trend is, and I hope I'm not judging. I'm not judging, okay, so don't hear that coming out of me. But I've been fascinated by this trend for people to watch other people clean their houses on TikTok. You don't clean your house. You watch someone else clean their house. And I'm fascinated by it. Because, first of all, we've bought lots of stuff we don't need because it appeared on TikTok. Look at this new scrubbing thing, right? And it's probably still in the box. But it's this thing, right? And so I'm not making this up. I finally got brave enough to sit down with one of our college students recently and just go, what is this about? Because I saw them watching a video of someone cleaning a house. It was like this, they were scrubbing something in the kitchen. I'm like, what is this? She's not even saying anything. And they said, well, and forgive the crassness of this, they have their stuff together. They didn't say stuff. They have their stuff together, and I don't, so I like watching them, right? Because they have their stuff together, and it gives me the perception that I can have my stuff together. And I thought, man, there's some truth in that, right? They have their stuff together, and I don't. And so it's a mental escape. It's like, well, I can't fix my situation, so let me watch somebody else who has theirs put together. This is why we like sitcoms, right? This is why we watched Family Matters when I was a kid, because nobody could be as messed up as Steve Urkel was, right? And they're like, okay, now my life feels better. This is why you watch, Step by Step. I'm trying to think of any other millennial ones that we liked so much, but I don't know any of the new ones either. I don't watch them as TV anymore. But this is why we do this. It's like an escape. I'm just gonna pretend, right? It's why I escape into books. I'm just being honest. It's why I might find myself picking up and reading Lord of the Rings for the 30th time. It's an escape. It puts my mind somewhere else. If I could just, I don't know if I want to deal with this. I don't know how to deal with this thing. I don't know what this I don't know how to make this go away. So I'm gonna pretend. I'm gonna put my life somewhere else. Here's the hard truth, okay? The way of the world leads to outer destruction. And here's what I mean. This is the way of the world leads to relationship destruction. The way of the world leads to addiction. Because, see, what happens is when you got this problem and you want to put it down, but you can't put it down, you pick up something else to cope with it, right? And we're looking for relief. That's just what it is. We're looking for relief. And then first it was a TikTok, and then it was like maybe a YouTube channel, and the next thing you know, maybe it's a substance, right? Because this isn't having its power, and there's never enough. It never seems to bring enough relief, and it just steps and steps and steps and steps, and we pick up something that we wish we hadn't picked up, or we enter into a relationship we wish we hadn't entered into, or we do something we wish we couldn't do, and we can't undo it once it's done. And so the way of the world leads to this form of outer destruction. It just kind of withers us away. Now, there's another way, right? I said it earlier, it's the way of religion. This is super popular in the American church. I know I'm in the American church, so it sounds so hypocritical for me to say what I'm about to say. I get that. But when life hands you something heavy, the way of religion is to hide or deny. See, we get into this weird relationship. We create this weird relationship with God. We say we're talking to God, right? And the way of religion focuses on this outward appearance thing and transactional agreements. Don't shake your head, don't elbow me, but tell me, like just in your head, nod, okay, if you've done this. God, if you will fix this mess, I promise I'll go to church on Sunday. God, if you'll just fix this, I promise I'll be the first one in line for communion. I'll be the first one in line to show up to Bible study. I'll join a small group. I'll serve in preschool. If you'll just do this. We do this thing, like we set up these transactional agreements with God. And that's what religion tells you to do, right? It's like an if-then statement. We get it in our brains that God becomes a vendor. He's a vendor on the other side of a desk. And we do this, then he does that. And every time, this is the problem, every time we don't get what we want after we do that, what happens? We get bitter, we get angry, we get frustrated, right? Wait a minute, God, you didn't hold up your end of the deal. This one is the most susceptible for me, if I'm just being completely honest. This is the way I grew up. This is what I was taught when I was a kid, and it's nobody's really fault. It's just my understanding of what had happened. So all my Sunday school teachers watching, I love you. I'm sorry, okay? But I got into this thing where like, okay, God, I'm a good person, and I love people, and I'm going to be kind, and I'm going to do all these things, so my life's going to work out, right? And it was this transactional agreement that I set up with God. Now, here's the problem. The way of religion leads to a form of inner destruction, right? Because it's all this mental gymnastics stuff that you do, and you find yourself being bitter and angry and frustrated because God didn't do what you think he should have done. In religion, right? Gosh, Jesus was so upset with the Pharisees and talk about hypocrisy all the time. And we want to make it easy for us to wag our finger at them. But the truth is, we kind of find ourselves in this camp sometimes too, right? That okay, God, you said this is how things are supposed to work. I actually met somebody once. I'm not making this up. We were in a Emmaus gathering, and the guy came up to me, and I was talking about something that was happening in my life. He said, well, God has to fix that for you. And I said, what? He goes, well, he does. You said this thing. So as soon as you said that thing, God is required. And I just kind of stepped back for a minute going, I don't think that's how it works. Like, do we have like a rope around God's neck and we can drag him around however we want? If we do, that's a small God. I'm not really sure that I'm interested in a relationship with a God like that. But see, here's the thing. This is why this is so tempting, but it's also so destructive. See, that sounds easy, doesn't it? Okay, God, here's my box. I checked it. Here's the line you signed on. And we want that. I kind of want that sometimes. But God never promised that. In fact, what he promised is so much better, but we miss it, right? So we got the way of the world and we got the way of religion, right? These are the two things. And these two pathways will either lead to inner or outer destruction for us. And we don't see it that way at the time, but the further down the pathway you go, this is where you end up. Then, okay, you got the third way, which I told you is the way of Jesus. This is the one that I want us to camp in for the next 7 weeks. And this is the one I want us to think about when we're faced with difficult times. When life hands you something heavy. When life hands you something heavy, Jesus' way is to surrender it to him. Now, I know that sounds completely churchy, and some of you that are like, borderline about faith, they're like, oh, there it is. He said the word, surrender. What does it even look like, right? Well, here's a verse that I talked about this about 4 months ago, but I want to come back to it just briefly today and explain something, and then on the other side of it, I'm going to explain to you what surrender really looks like, okay? So deep breath, one more verse to work through. You got this? Here we go. Jesus said something incredible in the presence of Matthew, one of his disciples. And Matthew wrote it down, recorded it for us, and in the first book of the New Testament, his gospel with his name, we get this statement from Jesus. And it's overquoted. If you've ever been to a funeral, it's on every flower, right? It's one of those things we plaster on our walls, but we don't think about it in the way that we should, and we miss the richness of this verse because we've just made it cliche. Listen to what Jesus says. Come to me, all of you who are weary and burdened, fill in the blank, all of you who are carrying heavy stuff, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. See, what we miss in life, when life hands us something heavy, we miss out on something Jesus wants to do in us. And the reason is because you can't take what Jesus wants to offer you if you don't put down what you're carrying. Like, your hands are full. And Jesus is offering to give you something in place of the heavy thing that you're carrying. And he's offering to do something in you that is transformative and incredible, but you can't take it if you're still carrying the thing. I want to break just a piece of this out for you for just a minute. See, when Jesus said this, it was understood in a little bit different way. Can you throw the verse back up here for me, the next slide, please? Thank you. So Jesus said, take my yoke upon you, right? Take my yoke upon you. And what that meant, like we miss the middle of this. This is Jesus' way of life. That's really what he's saying. I want you to take my way of life upon you. Take my way of life upon you. Take my way of looking at things. Take my way, like this life that I'm buying for you. This life that I'm giving myself so that you can have. Take that upon you. Learn from me, he said. For, and this is the big thing, okay? For I am gentle. Let's start with this one first. So the way of the world is not gentle. And the way of religion is not gentle. Because what happens in the world, right? The way of the world leads you to this outer destruction where, like, you find yourself with addiction, you find yourself with escapism, you find yourself with regrets, and nobody around you seems to care. In fact, if anything, they're frustrated that you're not working harder, doing more, getting your job done, keeping it together. Why are you a burden? Have you heard all these things before? The way of the world is to just kind of keep lumping more weight on you. Well, in the way of the religion, it's not gentle either, because what happens is, right, you find yourself in this pathway. I'm going to do this, and then God's going to do this. And if you're surrounded with a bunch of people that think that, as soon as you do this and God doesn't show up, they look at you and say, well, you didn't have enough faith, or you didn't do enough things, or God's angry with you, and they cast you out. How many times, I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations with people probably sitting in this very room that they came to our church because they got kicked out of another one. For doing, something happened, some calamity happened, some crisis happened in their life, and they're like, well, in their world, the view of religion, you can't do that thing. And I'm not saying that whatever that behavior was is good. I'm just saying Jesus is saying, bring that to me, right? The way of religion may say no, but Jesus is saying, I will meet you with a gentle hand. There's this great encounter that Jesus has with this woman who's caught, and it says in the very midst of adultery. It's found in the Gospel of John. And these Pharisees, these religious people, drag her in front of Jesus' feet and just cast her down at his feet. And they say, okay, you know what? How do you judge? What does she need to do? She's clearly sinned. Jesus knew she sinned too, right? They were basically waiting to see which one of them got to execute her first. And so after the encounter, when Jesus just completely ignored them, they leave. He looks her in the eyes. I love this. He looks her in the eyes and he goes, where did all the people that were judging you go? Where did all your accusers go? And he goes, I'm not going to judge you either. Go and sin no more. Gentle. See, Jesus meets us in our points of need and our points of hurt and our points of heavy with a gentle hand. But that's not the only thing he meets us with. The next thing he says is, if I am humble in heart, right? I'm humble in heart, Jesus says. I don't know how many times you've been met with people who seem to know exactly what you need to do. And maybe your interactions with them have been great, but most of the time when I run into someone, they're like, I know exactly what you need to do. It doesn't really sound like humble. It sounds like they've got some motivation in them. I've gotten to the place I'm so jaded. This is way more transparency than you really want, but you go to a presentation and you just know there's an ask at the end of it. And part of you just wants to go, just tell me what you're going to ask me so I don't have to sit here for 20 minutes. You ever done that? Right? Like it just, and you realize like it wasn't about trying to help me. It wasn't about something that was going on with me. It was about what you needed and how you wanted it for me. Jesus says, that's not what I'm about. I will meet you with a gentle hand and a humble heart. But then the reciprocal of that is also true, that he's offering us this life of humility where it isn't about us either. The opening song that we're singing is like, the world doesn't revolve around me. That's a sentence we need to say out loud every once in a while. And the thing is, when the world revolves around you, you feel like you got to carry it all. But when you realize it doesn't, the weight gets lighter. Because then you can go, okay, well, since it's not all about me, and God still loves me anyway, knows exactly who I am, I'm going to go like this, and I'm going to give this thing to you. Because the other thing for this verse that I don't want you to miss is the last part. It's the most important part. If you do these things, right? Take my yoke upon you, I'm gentle, humble at heart, I will give you rest for your souls. Quick show of hands from all of you who are carrying something heavy. Who doesn't want rest for your soul? Yeah, me too. Jesus is simply saying, if you will come and take my life upon you, if you'll follow me, if you'll stop with religion, if you'll stop with this stuff the world is saying, no guilt, okay, no, not laying it on you, not making you feel bad for the choices you've made in those moments. They're hard, it's difficult to make those choices. But if you just take me on, you will find rest for your souls. So what does surrender look like? It's the last thing and I'm done, okay? It looks like release and receive. Release and receive. You take that thing, whatever that heavy weight is that you're holding in front of you, and you just go like this. And you never pick it up again. Now, I know that sounds hard because the thing is like, okay, God, my marriage, I'm struggling in my marriage and I don't know how to fix it, right? Okay, well, give it to me. All right, and then 3 days later, something happens, and you want to go pick it up again. She's like, no. You gave it to me. Receive my grace, receive my path of life, receive my truth for your life, receive my way for your life, follow me, continue to follow me, love your spouse well, and I will take care of the rest. That's what he's saying, so right, leave it to me. Don't pick it up again. Well, God, my job, I don't know what to do with this thing. You gave it to me. Leave it to me. And then what you get to do is you get to receive his way of life. You get to receive his heart. You get to receive his truth. You get to receive his peace and this rest, this unbelievable rest that comes for your soul for not having to carry weights you were never meant to carry anyway. So I want to leave you with this prayer. I don't know what your weight is. I don't know what the thing you have is. I don't know what you're struggling with, but it doesn't really matter because I know the God who is asking you to give it to him. And so I just want to give you this really simple prayer. And I don't ask you to say it out loud. I'm asking you to think about it, go home, and maybe decide to pray this and mean it. Lord, I give you blank. I give you my career. I give you my addiction. I give you my marriage. I give you my kids. I give you our financial problems. I give you our debt. I give you, Lord, I give you blank. And if you pray that, and you release that, and you're sincere, I believe in my heart that God will show up, that God will go to work, and you will find rest for your souls. And I don't believe that just because, I feel like I'm smart. I believe it because Jesus actually said it. When life is heavy, I will follow. We're going to pick it up there next time with part 2 and our next win statement. Would you pray with me? Heavenly Father, thank you so much for the way in which you love us and the offer for us to lay our heavy stuff down at your feet. God, there's so many of us wrestling with things that we don't know how to let go of, and so give us the power to just hand them over to you today. But not only just hand them over to you, but to take your life upon us. It's reciprocal. We hand you our stuff, we take your life upon us, and we begin to follow you in our day-to-day. And you show up and you work a mighty work, regardless of our circumstances. God, I pray that for the people here in this room today. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you all so much for coming today. God bless you. We will see you next week for part 2. Bring somebody with you.